CSS before, or you know the meaning. Okay. So I'm still expecting your comments. So let's move on. So CSS it just stands for cascading style sheets, and it is a language or a tool that we use in styling the web. So whenever you see a beautiful website, it's all thanks to either CSS or one of its frameworks. Okay, so we'll discuss on the frameworks later, but we're dealing with the base now, which is CSS. Okay, so CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and is a style sheet language used to describe the presentation of a document written in a markup language like HTML. Okay, so it is a style sheet language that used to describe the presentation of a document. So in the sense that we can apply these styles in various ways and in different formats. So it is what gives the web page or website beauty. And essentially, it's the technology that allows us to style and design web pages. So once you put in your HTML code, you notice that all of it is just in the default format. So we can actually change the way that format is being presented in order for it to make it attractive. Okay, so CSS is what makes the web page look good, like the paint, furniture, and overall design of the house. So imagine we are building a house now, and then with all the cement and the block, and maybe they just put the wood on top, preparing for the roofing. It is not attractive yet, but when a house now when it's painted, when you apply the roofing, when you do all sorts of things like interior decorations, you furnish the house and all of that, the house now becomes much more attractive. So think of CSS that way. So on the right hand side, you can think of it as the flesh or skin of the web. So when we're taking HTML, I said think of HTML as the skeleton. And now CSS is now the skin of the web, right? So the skin that covers the skeleton is what makes it beautiful. Just imagine all of us, we are just walking bones. You won't be able to differentiate who is, we won't be able to appreciate one another or our beauty. Okay, so that's what CSS is useful. So this is just a GIF image. So you can see the HTML. It just gives the basic structure. Then the HTML plus CSS gives it the color. And then when we get to JavaScript, we'll discuss about that. JavaScript is basically used for the functionality of the web. Okay, so JavaScript gives the web functionality. Okay, so let's move on. So now I'll move to the history of CSS. If you are following, just drop it in the chat. Just type following in chat if you are following. So we'll move to the history of CSS now. So currently we have 3 versions of CSS, but you can see there are like 5 here. Okay, so I'll be explaining why it's 5 in a bit. So the first CSS that we had was CSS1, and it came out of W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, as a recommendation in December 1996. Okay, so this version describes the CSS language as well as the simple visual formatting model of all the HTML tags. So it was quite, let's say, old and simple. Then they felt the need to move on to CSS2, and so It became a recommendation in May 1998, and it built on CSS1. As technology keeps coming out, it keeps on improving. So this version added support for media-specific style sheets, like printers and oral devices, downloadable fonts, element positioning, and tables. Okay, so CSS2 was mostly known for tables, especially the floats and the clear. Then we now add CSS3. So it came out in June 1999. Older versions of CSS, just like I said before. So each new version builds on documentation known as modules. So the CSS1 and CSS2 were just like one specific document, like all the code was written in one document. But when they got to CSS3, they started noticing that, okay, we need to like decentralize this process. And then they split these documents into different modules. So parts of the documents were split, and then they connect back to the main document. So think of it as like you have a cow now, and then you cut different pieces of the cow. Maybe you cut the leg, you cut but in some way they are connected back to the cow. So rather than having one single document, we now have many modules. So it is these modules that are now updated frequently. Okay. So those are the three main versions of CSS. So HTML has 5 versions and CSS has 3 versions, 3 main versions. Okay. So what about the CSS 2.1 and CSS 4? So let's look at that. So the CSS 2.1 was a refinement of CSS 2. So it was focused on making CSS2 more stable and more interoperable. Okay. So they just removed poorly supported features and clarified existing ones. So just removing the bad ones and making the existing ones better. That was CSS 2.1 was for. So it started in 2004, but it was officially like everything was released in 2011. Okay, so the development of CSS 2.1 started in 2004, but it was finalized and made official in 2011. Okay, then so CSS 4 does not really exist as its formal specification. Okay, so there's no single release date for CSS 4, but recent advancements can be likened to CSS 4 in the sense that it does not exist as a unified specification, but each module that is being updated through different stages is what makes the CSS 4. So you can see new attributes of the CSS, maybe the flexbox, for instance. Maybe you just discover something in the flexbox. You can refer to that as CSS4, but it does not actually exist. Okay, so CSS4 is quite recent too, started in 2007, and till date is being improved upon. Okay, I hope we're following. So now let's move to the main topic of today. So if you can get this, you can rest assured that you understand about 80% of CSS. So CSS selectors, properties, and values, they are quite key for understanding what CSS is. Okay. So let's see what's in store for us. So CSS selectors are patterns used to select the HTML elements you want to style. Okay, so there are fundamental parts of CSS that allows us to target specific elements or groups of elements on a web page and apply styles to them. So take this the house example I gave before. When you want to paint a house, you need to start, then you move to the back, you move to the sides, then you move to the insides. Okay, so you need to like select a place you want to paint before you actually paint it right. So the same thing applies to CSS too. Yeah. code that you want to style before applying style to it. And that is what the selector is for. So we have many types of selectors. Most of them have been given on the material on the MarkTech platform. So we can check that, but I'll just explain maybe 5 or 6 of them. So number one is the ID selector. Okay. So the ID selector works with IDs in HTML. So remember we mentioned IDs and classes the last time we did HTML. If you can't remember, you can just refer to the video, although I'll be making an example shortly. So the ID selector and the class selector, they are like unique identifiers, okay? But the ID is only unique to one, while you can use the class for similar groups. Okay, so the ID selector is usually represented with an hashtag. Then we move to the class selector. This class selector is represented by a dot, okay? Then we move to the element selector. So we can actually select any of these elements, maybe key elements and all of that. So any element, you can actually select it and then apply the style to it. Then we have the star selector. So the star selector is also known as the universal selector. So it selects everything on the HTML structure, and then you can apply any style to it. And then we now have pseudo classes or pseudo elements. So pseudo classes are also used when you want to perform a specific action. Take for instance, you want to hover over a button. Maybe you've had the experience before. You hover over a button or you click on something and something happens. So, but most times, let me use the over example, mouse over a button and the color changes. There's a particular that change here. Okay, so those are pseudo classes. Then you also have pseudo elements too. So we'll look at all of that shortly. So let me switch to my VS Code. So I hope you can see my VS Code. If you can see this screen, just type VS Code. You can see this screen, just type VS Code. So let me open my folder. So I have a folder for this. I can. Okay, thank you. So you all can see the screen. Okay. So this is from where we left off in the last class. So I'm going to start again, just when it loads. So the VS Code environment is still loading. So for those of us who don't know how to install extensions, just come to this. Once you download VS Code, just come to this extensions panel or the extension pane. All right, and then you select it. You can search for various extensions, okay? So you can just type in the extensions in the resource section. So this is Emmet, so you can install any of the two and all of that, okay? So I'm going to delete all of this. Maybe I'll delete these two. So I'm going to type in some HTML code. So, but with MS, you don't need to really type it in. All I'm going to do is type in an exclamation mark, and you can see this MS abbreviation here. I'm going to click on it. So it gives me the basic structure that I need. So I'm just going to name this Introduction to CSS. Right. And then I'm going to add some text. So I'm going to say maybe div. I'm going to have a div, a container. I'm going to use lorem ipsum. Okay. So the lorem ipsum shortcut comes with the Emmet extension. So if you want like maybe 20 words, 20 random words, or 20 Latin words, you can just type lorem 20. And then if you want maybe 5, so I'm going to put an header element there. Just say lorem 5 or lorem 3. So it gives me 3 Latin words. And then let's add a paragraph too. So I can have this McGeorge 50. So I have 50 words right there. Okay, if you are following. So let's just look at this. So I'm going to go live. So with the live server extension, you can go live so that every time you save your work, you don't need to refresh your browser. Okay, so this is the, so you can see the web page. So the title and then the rest, okay? So let me switch back to VS Code. Okay. I think it's on another desktop. Oh, wrong desktop. So let me see if I can open it here. Yeah, just a second, please. Okay. All right. So this is the basic code. So please, I'd like us to listen. So there are basically 3 ways to apply CSS to your code. So the first one is the inline style. So you can apply CSS styles from the open tags section. Okay. So all I need to do is to pass in the style attributes, and then I can choose to do whatever I want. So I can say I want the color of this to be red. Okay, so the lorem ipsum will appear red. Then I can check my browser, and you can see it has changed to red. Okay, so that's one way. Then the second way is to create a style section in the head section. So this is the head section of the HTML document. And then I can put my style tag here. All right. And then apply styles from here. So I'm going to select the P element and then apply styles to it. So remember that we have 5 types of selectors. So we have the ID, the class, the element, the universal selector, and all of that. Okay, so I'm going to use the universal selector first, which is the asterisk. So this selector selects everything on the web HTML structure and then apply styles to it. So I can say I want the color for everything to be red, or let's say blue. Okay. And I've saved it now, so I'll check back. So you can see the rest are blue except for the H1, which we termed red. Okay. So why is that? So the reason for that is because the inline style is more important than the style section in the head section. So it's like a ranking order. So CSS will most likely pick an inline style over a style in the head section. And a style in the head section most likely be picked over an external style sheet, which is the third way about style elements. So the recommended way is to use an external style sheet so that you have all your style code in one place. Are we following? So you can add a style inline. So what you need to do is to add the style attributes. So you type in the style attributes first, and then you choose the attributes, pick the attributes you want or the property you want to use, and then apply the value to that property. I hope you get me. Use style section in the head section to apply CSS styles. All right. So the third way, so I've used the universal selector. So I'm going to delete that, or let me comment that out. So in CSS, we also have comments, also in HTML. So the universal shortcut is Control/. So once I press Control/, it comments it out for me. So comments in CSS I used to make your code more explainable, so that you can explain your code more or explicable. So if you're working in a group or you're working with other people, you can just make the code more explainable to those who are coming around or those who are working with you. So, but another thing that the comment does is that it doesn't allow the code to run. Okay, so you can just comment it out. So I'm going to remove this too, and I'm going to save. So anytime you're using the inline style, it always goes in the open tag section. So you just type the space and you type the style and then apply the property and the value. Anytime you want to use the style in the edge section, you put it under or just put it in the edge section. Doesn't necessarily need to be under. Just put it in the style section and you are good to go. Okay. Then the recommended method is to use an external style sheet. Okay, so I'm going to create a new style sheet. So I'm going to hover over this place and create a new file and call it styles. So every CSS file ends with the extension .css. Okay, every HTML file ends with the extension .html. So because I'm creating a CSS file now, I will name it styles.css and I'll enter. So I'll just like us to listen for now, and then when we get back to our various, when we are settled, can just practice, right? But for now, let's listen. So I've created the styles page. So the next thing I need to do after creating the styles.css is to link it to my HTML document. So how do I do that? So I'll come back to my HTML document and I'm going to need a link attribute here. So I'm just going to type in link. So you can see I can link many external resources, right? So that's what the link tag is for. You used to link external resources to your HTML code. So Emmet has already provided the template for linking CSS style sheets. So I can click on it, and then I'll need to, in the href section, I'll need to input the path of the file. So that means where the file is located. So make sure your CSS file is located in the same file as or in the same folder as your HTML file to avoid path errors. Okay. So I'm going to copy the relative paths. So I'll just right click on the style CSS sheet and I'll copy the relative paths and then paste it inside here. Okay. And then I'll save it. So how will I know if it's working? So I'll come here and then add some. I'm going to use the universal selector again. So remember I said the universal selector selects everything in the HTML document and then you can apply a style to it. So HTML documents, the universal selector selects everything and then I'm going to make the color for everything blue. And I'm going to save it. So I'll need to check my browser to see if it's working. So you can see everything is now blue. That means it's working. Okay. So this is how you can apply styles using an external sheet. So now let's take the remaining selectors. I hope you're following, or am I too fast? So if you have any concerns, please let me know. So we mentioned the ID selector, right? So in HTML documents, we have okay, am I too fast? Is that what the yes is for? Okay, so I'll try to slow down a bit. So in the HTML documents, so we are still in selectors, right? So I've mentioned inline styles, I've mentioned styling in the edge section, and then I've mentioned the recommended way how to use CSS. That's using CSS in an external style sheet, right? And we saw how I created the external style sheets, right? So you just need to hover over, if you're using VS Code, create a new file and name it styles.css or anything.css. As long as it ends with the extension.css is okay, right? Then you can now connect that external style sheet by using the link tag. So if I type in link, you can see MS provides me the CSS abbreviation, and then I can click on it. Okay, so what needs to go into this href is the file path. That means where the file is located on your system. So make sure your file, your CSS file, is in the same folder as your HTML documents. So I can see my CSS file here. All I need to do is to copy the relative paths by right-clicking on it. And I see copy relative paths, and then I copy it. Okay, are we following? So I need to copy the relative path and now put it inside of the href attributes. Okay. So after doing that, I now need to save it and then go to my style sheet now. So what I explained with the select, so we have many types of selectors, and I mentioned the star selector before. So if you go back to the slides, we'll see the different types of selectors, although there are more, but we'll just be focusing majorly on 5. Okay. So we've seen the types of selectors. So this is the star selector or the universal selector. And what it does is it selects all the elements. That means it selects everything in the HTML code and applies styles to it. And that is why when I change the color to blue, you notice that everything in the web page became blue because it's selecting everything and it's applying necessary style to them, which is the color, changing the color, right? Okay, so there are other ways we can select each element. So what if I don't want to select everything? What if I just want to select only a few? What do I do? So there are other ways to do that. The first way is to select the element name. So I can select the H1 element and style it separately, select the P element and style it separately, select the div element and style it separately. Okay, are we following? So if I want to do that, I'll need to just select the element name. So let's select the P element. So I want to make the color of this aspect, this P tag, this P element, I want to make it red. So all I need to do is to select the tag and then open the curly bracket. Are we following? And then I can change the color. So I'll apply the color. So this is the attributes I want to change, right? So this is the attributes. And then I can now apply the value I want to change. So this will be, let's say, red. Then I can close it. So if I save this and I go back to check the browser, you can see that part is now red. So I'm following. So I successfully styled the P elements. What if I want to style the H1 element too? What do I do? All I need to do is to select the tag. So using the tag selectors now, or the element selectors, you simply need to look at the name of the HTML tag, then select it in the styles of CSS. So H1 in this instance. Let's say I want to change the color to yellow. So this H1 is the selector. This color is the property or the attribute. You can call it property. And then this yellow is the value of that property. So I can save this and also check my browser again. You can see it has become yellow. So all these things are used to style web pages. So that is how to use the element selector. So now we might have instances of many p tags, or many duplicate tags. So if I have maybe another p tag, and I want to make the first p tag maybe red, and I want to make the second one blue, how do I do that? That is where the idea of classes and ID comes to play. So in cases where you have repeated elements, which we usually do if you're working on a large project, you might need to style things differently. So you might want to make this red, and you might want to make this blue. But if you use this element selector, it will make all the P elements red, which is what we don't want. Okay? So this is the red. So if I check now, you see all the P elements are red, right? So but I want to make this maybe green or another color. So how do I do that? So what I need to do is to add a unique identifier or a group identifier to any of them. So for IDs, you just simply need to type in the ID, and then let's call this ID1. Okay, so you can use hyphens or underscore in your naming convention, or let's name it first paragraph to make it so first paragraph. So I'll name it first P, right? And then the second ID for the second one, I'll name it second P. Okay. So this is the first thing you need to do. If you have multiple elements, make sure you select a unique identifier or a group identifier. So unique identifiers are IDs, in the sense that this ID must not be the same as the other ID I'm applying to another element. Okay. And then since I want to make the second one a different color, I can now select it and say, so if you want to select an ID, you must start with the hashtag. So hashtag second E, and then I open my curly bracket, and then I make the color green, and then I save it. Are we following now? So you can see I've successfully changed the color of that P element using a unique ID that is common to only it. So that's what the ID selector is for. So the first thing you need to do is to put a unique identifier. So put a unique identifier if you're using ID. So IDs must not be the same. They must not be the same name. Okay, but classes can be the same name, right? So so the IDs must not be the same. So you need to put in the ID where you want to apply the style to. And then you now come to your external style sheet. So when you're selecting an ID, you must first start with the hashtag and then the name of the ID. So in this case, I start with the hashtag and then the name of the ID, which is second P. So you can see I'm going to change this whole paragraph to green, and this is the name of the ID, second P. Can we see that? So if I want to change the first one too, I'll need to start with the hashtag again. So hashtag first P, right? And then let's say I want to change the font size to, let's say, 30 pixels, and I save, right? And then I can check my browser and see it's bigger now. So can we see that? So that's how to use the ID selector. So once you give an HTML element an ID, you need to select it with the hashtag and then apply the style to it. So the second one is to use classes. So if we are trying to give a class, you simply need to use the class attributes. So an element can have either a class and an ID or both, depending on the use case. Okay, but class is majorly used for grouping similar styles together. So imagine I want to make all the, let me create another H1, or maybe say all the header elements, let me create an H3 or 2. So I'm using the lorem ipsum abbreviation from Emmet. So let me put it here. So let's say I want to make all the header sections a font size of, let's say, 64 pixels. So what I can do is to create a class. Since I want to make this header section 64, I also want to make this header section to 64. I don't need to start selecting them one by one. I can just assign a class or a group to those similar things I want to style and then style them at once. So that's what classes are used for. So the first thing that I need to do to use a class selector is to add a class identifier first. And then you can say, let's say, big fonts. So class names can be the same. So class of big font. I also come here and add the class of big font too. Big font. Okay. So I've added, so you can see they hold the same name. So that means they are sharing the same group or the same attribute once you apply the styles. So I'll now go to my style.css sheet. And then if I want to select a style, a class element, or a class identifier, I will need to use full stop. So remember, for IDs it's hashtag, but for classes it is full stop. Okay, so I add the full stop and then big fonts. And then we can change the font size to 64 pixels. And then we can also change the font family too. So let's see the font family. Let's use Lucida Sans. Okay. So don't bother about the syntax for now. Just follow along. Try to get what I'm doing. So you notice that if we check the browser now, notice that the two places where you apply classes now have the same styles. So if you want to style something that is almost the same, just apply a class attribute to it and style it at once rather than having to select it multiple times. I hope you understand that. So I've covered the major ones. So we also have the pseudo classes and the pseudo elements. So we'll dwell on that more in the next class, but let me just show us. So we can actually alter the styles based on some actions. So let's say once I move my mouse over any of these big fonts, I want the size to shrink. Okay, I want the size to shrink. So what I can do is to apply a pseudo class. So what I need to do to use a pseudo class, I need to select what I want to style first, either an ID, an element, or a tag, and then a class. So this example now, I'm using a class. So what I want to do is that once I move my mouse over any of these header sections, either the learn, ipsum, dollar, or this one, I want the size to change, to shrink to a smaller size. So I can use a pseudo class to do that. So I need to, after selecting the class or the selector, I need to apply an over pseudo class. Okay, so you can see this over. So this over stands for when you move your mouse over something, then a style can be applied. So I want to say change the font size to 12 pixels. Okay, so when I move my mouse over those header sections now, I expect the font size to string, right? So let's check it out. Okay, it's not working yet. Let me see what's wrong. Um, Let me check the color. So sometimes your style might not reflect immediately. So you need to debug and see where the error is coming from. Okay, let's see now. Uh, Let me change, let me use an ID. So it's not okay. Changing now. So can we see that? So sometimes you need to just relax and debug. So let me adjust the color to green. So the color was red before. So sometimes if the selector is not working, it needs to be more specific. So we'll explain that in the next class. So there's something known as specificity in CSS. Okay. But we'll explain that in the next class. So each of these selectors, they have priority, they have order of priority. So ID is the highest priority. Okay. So that's what I mean by specific. So you can see now the color changes when I drag my mouse over it. And when I remove my mouse, it goes back to red. So this is an example of a pseudo class. You also have pseudo elements too, but it will be covered in the next class. Okay, I hope you understand now. So those are the major types of selectors. So let's move to the slides. So if you understand, you can just type understand in the chat. Okay. So CSS properties are the attributes used to style HTML elements, and they define how an element should look or behave. Okay. So each property has a specific set of values that it can accept, which determine the effects of the property. So you can see me using color, font size, font family, and all of that. So those are examples of properties. And then the value that you attach to them may be red, 12 pixels, and all of that are known as the values. So you have the selector. So you must first select, and then you select a property that is what you want to change, and then you assign a value to it. That means the value or how you want to change that. Okay, so think of it like this. So the property, there are a lot of properties. Okay, and then we can assign a value to any of these properties. So the value is what or how we want to change that aspect or change the property. Either the want to change the color to red or want to change the font size to make it bigger or smaller, anyone. So that's just what the value is for. All right. So are we following? So let me know if you're following, please. So now let's move to the basic CSS syntax. So I've done this before. So the basic CSS syntax is just number one, you have to select the elements you want to apply the style to. Okay, so that one is certain. So you can either use any of the selectors, either an ID, an element selector, a class selector, or a pseudo class. Then there's only the universal selector that selects all the elements on an HTML document. Okay, So you have to select the elements you want to style first, or the group of elements. So if you're using a group of elements, use the class selector. If you want just a specific element, it's either you use the tag selector if it's just one instance of that element, or you use the ID selector. So IDs are unique. They are not. They cannot be the same. There cannot be two IDs for of the same name in a particular HTML document. It will not work. So your IDs needs to be unique, but your class names might not be unique. So you can have similar class names for multiple elements. Okay. So you need to select the elements first when you want to style, and then you now select the property that you want to style. Okay, do I want to change the color? Do I want to change the position? Do I want to change the font size? Do I want to change this or that? Okay, and then you now apply the value. Okay, so this property now is the color property, and it has several values ranging from red, blue, green, orange, and all of that. And then we also have another property here. This is the text align, and then the same. So notice the syntax too. So H1 and then a curly brackets. Okay, and then you input the property name, put a colon, put the value, and then you end it with a semicolon. So you must always end with a semicolon to show that it has stopped. If you don't put end with a semicolon, it will just throw an error for you. It will not work. So, but you don't need to worry about that if you are using MS. So let me just show you. So if you're using MS, and if I say P1, and then I open my bracket and I just press enter like that. So you can see it has already pre-populated the colon and the semicolon for me. So I don't need to worry about that. So if I type on tab, I am okay. So that's one of the advantages of using VS Code. You get to work with multiple extensions. So you don't need to worry about little things like the colon and the semicolon ending a declaration. Okay. So the declaration is the combination of both the property and the values. That means all the styles that you're applying makes a so all the styles that you're applying makes a declaration, the property and the value. Do we get that now? Or do we have any questions? So if you have any questions, let me know. So let's move on. So now we move to another important aspect of CSS, which is layout techniques. Okay, so most times, even people that are advanced developers usually encounter problems with CSS sometimes. And this is because some of them don't understand layout techniques. So you can see in the GIF, you keep on adjusting until everything scatters, which is not too good. But once you understand the layout techniques, you can actually control that. And even when there's an error or when you're not achieving your desired results, you can know what is wrong. Okay, so that's the importance of layout techniques. So we have various layout techniques. So I'm going to explain them one after the other. So the first one here is the flow. So the flow is just the default technique of how elements are being positioned or being styled or being laid out. Okay, so layout is like positioning your elements on the pages. So you notice that some elements are on the left, some elements are on the right, and all of that. Okay. So let me switch to my code. So you can see as I keep on applying styles, or let me go to the browser instead so that I understand better. But first, let me introduce. So I'm going to be talking about inline and block elements here. So I'm going to include a span here and do lorem 10. Or let me do leave it at this. Okay. So for you to use this lorem abbreviation, you need to install the emmet from the extension panel. So just select the extension panel and search for element. And so we have this the span section now. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to inspect. So remember, HTML works in boxes. The one another. Like the first H1 comes up, the second one goes below, the third one goes below. So they are stacked on top one another. That's the default flow. And if I inspect, you see that some elements, the boxes extend the whole width of the browser, whilst for some elements, you can see the box is just limited to the content that is inside it. So for those that their boxes extend the full width of the browser, they are known as box elements or block elements. Okay. So you probably will hear block and inline elements. So these block elements, they have their whole width extending throughout the browser. So you can see the block, you can see the blue shade extends throughout the browser, and you can see where the text stops. But for inline elements, they are only as long or as wide as the elements, as the text inside them or the content inside them. And you can see an example is the span elements. So example of block elements are the P1, the P elements, the H1, the H3, and the likes. So all of these are on the MarkTechie platform. We can go through it. So I'll just be listing a few examples here. Then some examples of the inline elements are the span, then we have the anchor tag too, and some other ones. Okay. So the difference between these two is that this one you can adjust the width and the height, but for this you cannot adjust the width and the height. It has nothing to do with that. That is why it's only as long as the content inside it. Do you get it? So that's the difference between block and inline elements. So the default flow, the flow layout, that's the default. So it arranges elements on top of one another, a span, a block, like that. So block elements extend and occupy the full width, while span inline elements occupy just the width of their contents. Okay, they're as long as the width of their contents. Then the next one is the positioned. So I can actually choose to position elements based on some attributes or some other characteristics. I can choose where they are positioned. Okay, and you can see extract from normal flow to a precise position. So I can decide on, okay, I want this element to be at the right always, and it should always be there. So to do that, we use the CSS position property. So I'm going to be using, so let me delete or let me comment all of this. So I'm going to highlight and press Ctrl// on my keyboard to comment it out so that it doesn't show. So if I check my browser now, you can see all of it has disappeared. Okay, so I'm only going to be using this lorem ipsum for example. So we can actually adjust the flow using CSS. So let me delete all of this. So the first thing I need to do is to determine if I want to use the class or the tag itself. So I'm going to be using the tag itself to select it. So I'm going to come to the CSS and type H1. Okay. So what I can do, I can adjust the display. So if you want to change the display or how an element is being seen, so you can change a block element to an inline element. So if I change this to inline and I save it, and I go back to the browser, and I inspect, you can see the box is no longer extending to the full width. It's just at the as long as the content inside. Okay, but if I change that to block, so I can change the inline to block. All right, and then I check. So you can see the element is now extending throughout the full width of the browser. So that's the difference between an inline and a block element, right? Then we also have the position. So I can adjust the position using the position attributes. So I can make it relative, and I can make it static, and I can make it sticky, and I can make it absolute. So we have 4 values for this property. So the first one is relative. So when you make the position relative, it will determine the position of that element based on the closest elements to it. Okay. So you can now determine, okay, I want it to be, so after determining the position, you now have to specify maybe you want it maybe 20 pixels from the top and then 200 pixels from the left. So let me just say left. So we'll still cover all of this in details, subsequent classes, but just to show us how it works. If I come, you can see the position of this element has shifted. Okay. So it's relative to the closest element if there are 2. But if you make the position absolute, it determines the position based on the website screen or on the web page. So if I check again, you can see it shifts up a bit. So it's using a different reference point. So each of these positions have a reference point. Then it can also be sticky. So when you say something is sticky, when you scroll down, it will stick to the top. So that's just the difference. So sticky is one. Then it can be static. So you don't want it to move, or you don't want any other element to move it. You can make it static. All right. So that is the layout position wise. Then we have a table and the floats. Okay. So in ancient or in previous times, this was the basic way of structuring your website layouts using the concept of tables. So in tables, you can put elements on the left, you can put elements in the center and on the right. So they use tables and then they will not clean the border of those tables. Okay. So we have explained tables before in the HTML class, but we can also check out the resource on MacTechie too. All right. So I won't be able to give examples or show us how this works, but I'll just explain how it works. So for the table, just like you have these lines, so I can just position my H1 elements here and then position my H2 elements here, and at the end of the day, I'll just clean the lines for it to show that it's side by side. Okay. And then for the floats, it's based on the principle of these tables, right? So I can just send it to the left, but I'll need to clear the direction after. Because if I say an element should be floated to the left, subsequent elements after it too will also be floated to the left. So this is not used anymore to lay out websites. So what is now being used is the flex box and the grid. Okay. So let's see how the flex box and the grid works. So for tables and floats, so there is a float property, but it's not being used anymore. So if I just say float left, or float right rather, my element will just appear on the right. So can you see that? So I've just floated it to the right. But if you're using tables, you can actually put these elements in the top right corner of that table in your HTML. Okay. So that's one way. So just a glimpse of the floats. So the problem with this is that once I float a particular element, if I want to style, if I add another element after it, all of them will come into the right, which is not what we want, right? So most times you need to clear this and then start from here in. So there's the clear attributes too. So after floating, you need to clear. So you can see either clear left or clear right. And then once you add other elements, then they will start coming to the left instead of the right. But if you don't clear while using floats, all of them will continue at the right hand side, which is not what you want. Okay, so those are the old methods. So now let's see flexbox. So flexbox is used to position elements either horizontally or vertically, but default position is horizontally. So when I say something should flex, so I'm going to uncomment this so that we can see what I mean. So you can actually make elements side by side. So let me just comment the rest. So don't forget the universal shortcut, Ctrl//. Okay. So if I go back to the browser, I should see two elements now. So so thinking in boxes, right? If I want these two elements to be side by side, I need to make the container that is inside to be a flex box rather than each of the elements. So that's how flexbox works. So you need to be able to think in boxes, right? So I'll go to my CSS, select the body tag. So when I say body, open my curly brackets and change the display. So I'll use display attribute property and change it to flex or flexbox. Either of the two works. So but I'm going to use flex in my own instance. So if I go back to the browser, you can see it's now side by side, but they are not aligned yet, right? So the flexbox also offers some other properties which can use to align this. Okay, so you can add a gap between them. So you can add a gap property. Let's give it 50 pixels. So if you want gap to be between the two elements, you can add a gap. So you can see there's a little space now, right? And then you can also align them horizontally or vertically, and also change the orientation. So to do that horizontally, use justify content, no, justify items rather. Justify items center, and then if you want to do that vertically, use align items center. So you must know the one to use. So that's for vertical. So I'm going to comment that out and see. Okay. Let's see this. Okay, so for I said justify items is for horizontal alignment, while align items for vertical alignment. So you can see when I commented this out, it didn't align vertically, right? So if I'm aligning horizontally, that means this Lorem ipsum will be under here. But since they are side by side, they are vertical in that instance. Okay? So you want it to align vertically. So this is top, this is middle, and this is bottom, right? I want it to align in the middle, like this, vertically. So I need to use the align items. That is the property used to align items vertically. So I'll comment this out, because now it's horizontally. So we'll use it when I change the orientation. Okay. So if you want to change from row, so that's the row orientation. If you want to change from row to being a column, you can use the flex direction and just say column. So it can be a row. So when we get to flexbox properly, we'll explore all of this in detail. So this is just to introduce us to flexbox and grid. So can you see this? So this is Lorem ipsum and all of this. So when you use the flex direction column, this align items now becomes the one for horizontal, and the justify items becomes the one for vertical. I hope you get me now. So if it's in a row, if the flex direction is a row, the flex direction is row, right? So the align items will be the one for vertical, and the justify items will be the one for horizontal. But once we change from row to column, right, then these align items will now be for aligning items horizontally, and justify items will be for aligning items vertically. So that's why you can see these two are like centered because of the align items center property. So this is how to use a flexbox. So flexbox is just used to position elements either side by side, or you can just position them vertically too in a column format. But once you use display flex, the default layout is an horizontal layout. Okay. And then we also have grid. So you can display grid. So grid is aligning our laying items in a box format. Okay, so if I display grid, I'll need to now specify where I want to be a grid. Okay, so I need to specify the template columns and the template rows. So I can make it 2 rows and 3 columns, each one fraction or 100 pixels or any unit of measurement I'm using. So if I go to the browser now and I inspect, so I'll need to go to styles. So you see this layout section in your browser. Okay, so if you're using Mozilla Firefox, you will see that. If you're using Chrome too, you will see that in your style section under Chrome. So I can say display line numbers, display area names, and extend line. Okay, let me activate the grid first. So I'll just need to click on this. So you can see they are like lines. So I had three columns and 2 rows. And you can see these are the 3 columns and these are the 2 rows, right? So this is how grid works. You first change the container or where you want to position those elements into a grid. So a grid is like an intersection of lines which forms various boxes. And then you now select each element, or you now specify where each element wants to stay based on these lines that you are seeing here. So for you to see it, so I can remove the line numbers. So use these line numbers to specify where each element will stay. So once you inspect your browser, so let me do that again. So I've changed display to grid, right? So display grid. So I use the grid template columns property to create the columns. So I can also make the columns maybe 200 pixels. So fraction is another unit of measurements. And make this 400 pixels. So I want 3 rows, each 200 pixels, and I want 2 rows, each 400 pixels. Okay. Then you can also make this auto so that it picks the width by itself. So I'll now go to my browser. Let me check. Okay. So I'll go to my browser and I'll right click and then inspect the grid. So all of these, we're going to be doing them later. This is just an introduction to see how it works. So I'll activate the grid so you can see the columns and the rows now. So the first row is made up of auto columns. So each column, the width is defined by the content inside it. So it automatically adjusts to the content inside it. All right. So that's why this particular column is bigger than the remaining 2. And then I have two rows. So this is the first row and this is the second row. So I can choose to place maybe lorem ipsum dolor from line 3 to line 4, and it will stay there, just like that. So let's try that. So let's see the H1. So I can say H1, then grid so you can either use grid column start or grid column end. So you can say start at the row 1 column, the third line of the column, and then grid column. So end it at line 4, right? So let's check. So can we see that? So it's using these line numbers to specify where each element will be. So this is the column line. So I can say, okay, let this element to be start from line 3 and then end at line 4. I hope you can see that. Then if I want to position it at the second, at the bottom here too, I can do that. All I need to do is to specify the row. So we have grid column start and grid column end. Same thing for rows too. So I can say grid row start at so we can check the line. So we should let the line guide us. So start at line 2 for the row and then end at line 3. So we have both negative and positive values. So let's be careful while working with that. So grid row starts line 2, right? And end at line 3. Grid row. So soon end. So let's just see this. So you can see that's come down now. So I use the column and the rows to specify it at the bottom right now. So for the column axis, it will range from 3 to 4, and for the row, it will range from 2 to 3. So you can do that either way. Then if you don't want to use the grid column start, you don't want to be typing grid column start and end. So what you can do is to just use the grid column and then you specify the columns for you. So you can just say grid column. Just say 3 to 4, 3/4. And then grid row. I hope you are following. So I know some of us might not get it yet. So let's just watch the video after the class ends. I'm sure we get it, but it's quite simple. But the major thing is to understand the concept. So it's quite simple. We don't need to rush. All right, can just take our time and rewatch the video, and also code along when you're rewatching the video. So if you don't want to type column start, column end, row start, row end, you can simply use the grid column and the grid row. Okay, and you see, so let's position it at the second column, right? So that would be 2 to 3. So 2 to 3. I'll just change the column to 2 and then 3. Then you can also make an element span multiple rows and multiple columns. So can we see that 2 to 3? And you can see the sizes are adjusting because of the content inside. So that's because we have assigned an auto width to it. All right, so that's how the grid works. So these are ways in which people use to lay out elements. So anytime you see an element side by side on a website or on top of each other, is thanks to either Flexbox or Grid nowadays. So focus more on Flexbox or Grid. The rest are quite important. So then this position is used in specific cases, which we'll be seeing later. So the important ones you focus on are the position, the Flexbox, and the Grid. Okay. So let's move on. We've done the layout techniques. So conclusion now. All right. So CSS is a fundamental style sheet language that works alongside HTML to control the visual presentation of styling web content and enabling developers to create engaging, and well-designed websites. So this is just an introduction to see the wonders of CSS and how it works. So subsequently, as you take the lessons on MarkTechie and in subsequent live classes, we will dive deeper into CSS and see its importance and also understand it better. But this is just an introduction to show us how CSS works. So it's just a fundamental style sheet language which we can use to apply and beautify our websites. Okay, so we have several ways in which you can use CSS, several ways. So let me just show us maybe a project I worked on. Although I'm not a web developer, but I've done some web development projects. So I can just show you my GitHub. So let me look for repositories. So there are simple projects you can actually work on, right? They're available online. And then we'll also be working on it using in this MarkTechie platform. So let me show us this. So this is so you can see the language CSS, CSS, CSS. So let me open this. I hope you can all see my screen. So there's a live demo hosted. So let me open this. And then let me open an example of a grid. So I remember I did something like, okay, this is it. So you can see something like this. So you can see these elements positioned like side by side. This is Flexbox. And you can see when I hover over this, something happens. So this is an example of a pseudo class selector that we talked about. Then you can see elements being positioned on top of one another and all of that. So basically laying out the website. Okay, so you can also check this demo of the gallery page, right? So if you notice how these images are structured, they are structured using grid. So that's the essence of knowing your layouts. If I inspect the page, if I inspect this, so you can see there is a flex box and there are grids too. So if I activate the grid, you will see it. So this particular image is occupying from grid 2, from line 2 or column 2 to column 4. And that is why it comes out this way. So you can actually adjust and specify any elements that so this one has finished loading. So you can see the way all these elements are structured side by side. This is an example of flexbox. Okay, and you can see this is an example of grid. So you can see this starts at the top, but this starts like from a lower aspect. So this is grid. So you can use grid to structure these things. But knowing when to use grid and knowing when to use flexbox is very important. So when we get to the next class, we should be taking flexbox, we will dive deeper into flexbox and how to know when to use it. But you can see all of this is just basic layout. So this website is beautiful because the layout is quite clean. So you can see this is Flexbox. So Flexbox is quite common. You use Flexbox a lot. All right. So those are a few examples of Flexbox and the grid. So that will be all for the introduction. Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions? So please, while we're waiting for questions, let's fill out the attendance form. Let's fill out the attendance form. So I'll be expecting your questions before we wrap it up for the day. Okay, your question is on PHP admin or my admin. So PHP my admin is a backend tool, right? So this is a front-end development web development class for front-end. So we're starting with front-end first, but in later stages we get to PHP my admin. So maybe like week 8 or week 9. So when we get to week 8, so just check your timetable during that time. So you can ask that. But this class, any question related to HTML or CSS is what we'll be answering. Okay. Any other question? So please let's fill the attendance. Do we still have questions? You have an error on PHP admin. I'm not a backend developer, so I might not really be able to help you. But yeah, I can link with people that can help you. Just message me after the class. So do you have any question related to CSS or HTML before we wrap it up? So let's fill the attendance. Let's fill the attendance. And you can find my number on the Telegram group, or my name is Shotun. You see, just search for on any of the groups and message me. So kindly let's fill the attendance, please, for the call it a day. So in case you didn't get it, let's just relax and watch the videos. Watch the video again. And then subsequently on the MarkTechie platform, we're rolling out assignments and resources. Okay. So maybe I'll share my screen on how you can view assignments and resources before we. As they are filling the attendance, please pay attention. So here's my screen again. So I will go to my browser. So on the MarkTechie platform, you can be able to view attendance, quizzes, assignments, and all of that on the MarkTechie platform, starting from next week. All right. So once you sign in as a student, so I'm using a student account, a test student account. So I have to go to my learning. Okay. And then this is the course I'm enrolled in for. So I can view that course. So I'll see my progress, my validity, and everything. So I can view the course, right? So you can see this is the course, this is what is in the course, and then I've taken this before, that's why it's showing 100% done. And then if I tap on it, you can see the green tick. So for those that are not, their progress is not showing or is still at 0%, you need to actually take these courses for it to progress, right? So if you scroll down, you can see these sections here. You can see resources, you can see review, quiz, assignments, notice live class discussion. So this resources section will be for all material that can help you, or like the slides from today's class, and also some extra resources. So they will be uploaded in this section for that particular course you are taking. So starting from next week, although we'll notify you, but starting from next week, please ensure that you check the resource section to download available resources. And then there will also be quizzes too, in which you can take the quiz and then see your results after. All right. Then there will also be assignments. So the assignments can be in PDF format or in a zip file. All right. So you can view the details of the assignment and also see your results. So I can choose to view the details. So this is the test assignment. So you can check the assignment and then upload your own assignment. All right. Then I go back and then I can now see the results. So the instructor will be able to see the result of that assignment and grade you. And then you can see your own grades on the platform. So once you just get to your course, just scroll down to access any of these panes or these panels to do that. All right. So I hope you get that now. So subsequently, all our assignments, our resources, we will be able to get them on the MarkTechie platform. So thank you very much. So no questions, right? Please let's fill the attendance. So we'd like to appreciate everyone for attending today's class. So our next class will be next week Saturday, and we'll be diving deeper into CSS. So we'll be taking Flexbox and some other contents related to CSS. All right. So please let's fill in the attendance as we wrap up. Thank you very much.
The recording has stopped.
Okay, so have you all been able to fill the attendance? The link is working from my end, so maybe it's either the browser you're using or your network actually is not loading with your browser. Well, then that'll be all. We are going to end the session now. So see you all next week.